know.
Oh, the fourth week was a member would come with
President.
presentation on.
That was one that included the potluck, I think, maybe.
Oh, they all did.
No, no,
I thought they did.
there was once a month. Anyway, I eventually joined, but that was after Boethius. We did a different book.
But the wine with Augustine also had great potential, but it was just so unstructured and. You went down too many rabbit trails and.
Yeah.
You know, it never, it was to blame the leader, it's.
Morning,
part
Morgan.
of it.
Did you buy? No.
No,
You walk,
yeah.
you walk
I
on your
tell
hands or on your feet.
my food.
Oh, that's probably the way to go. Especially down at 6, if you lose, you know, then you're. Yeah. You live right, we talked about this before, you live just a block or so away from us,
Yeah.
so we know your walk, right?
Yeah, if there's people standing outside your house. this is
Yeah,
probably-
probably yes. She home, that's Becca, she's a big walker, she works at Walmart, so she walks.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah, 45-minute walk.
Yeah, no kidding you. What is that? 2 months? 3?
Not 3, it's probably close to 3. Maybe 3/4 or something like that. I used to walk out to the mall from our house to catch the bus home.
Yeah,
When that was running.
yeah.
There is a bus that went from like where Marshall's is today, that area.
It would, well, it picked up at
We
Lee City Park, it picked up, it picked up here. You know, it picked up in many locations, but I enjoyed getting a little exercise, so out there it would pick up right across from where Sangria's was. The Sangria's gone now, do you know what I mean? It looks. But that's where the deal was, and then finally the mall kicked us out of there and. They didn't like the bus coming through.
The bus
It was a great deal.
runs every day.
The 2 universities kicked in, and then, and the political umbrella, what made it happen was, well, we have these classes. Universities, people, students would take. So we have 2 students from over here for classes and vice versa, and then the term for that shared effort, and so we employ it, so we benefited.
I'm gonna bring the bus back.
Oh, it was great, and then they failed, and then U of I backed out.
Ooh.
So we lost X amount of funding. So then the bus was charging $1 a ride. I don't know about students, but certainly employees, not students. And that was fine, that was still okay.
Yeah.
But then finally it just was gone.
Oh, the difference between the universities?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it was Wheatland, so they have a number of chartered and whatnot, but this was just one of their.
But the universities are so centrally located to the 2 towns that it's
Yeah,
like,
right.
right,
It
exactly.
just, and so that was a political push. I wasn't, there were a number of people who were trying to go to City Hall.
Right.
And that was a big push to, get it going because of the student exchange.
Right. Betsy Johnson, welcome on the stream. I see you're in your car driving. Welcome everyone to whatever number episode this is. We're gaining towards 50 soon. On the syllabus, today is Monday, February 20th, you see, and I have this copy and pasted. We start our first day of Aquinas. We have Aquinas with us for 6 classes in a row until Wednesday, March 8th, after which the following week we will not be here because it is spring break and we follow the U of I spring break calendar. So the next non-Aquinas class is going to be a month from today, Monday, March 20th. We're Aquinas for the next month, basically.
Basically went almost.
Exactly. Yeah. Easter is what, April 9th or something. So like, yeah, it'll be already past like the midpoint of Lent by that time. Well, a quick note, if it's okay with all you guys, hello, Pat. On Ash Wednesdays, everyone cool starting class like at 10 o'clock? Is that okay? That work? I know you have class at 9, right? You can't. Okay.
I'm not gonna be here that day.
Anyways, okay. And this is what's so great about the recording is like, I even thought today, I wonder if anyone's going to show up. It's President's Day and the office is closed. But it's like, we keep chugging along. We have this Vatican-like city-state presence, so.
Wednesday.
I'm thinking I'll start class late on Wednesday. I'll send you, all of you and the core people and Brad and people like that, an email. I'm thinking that's just a 1 day, and simply because of the Ash Wednesday mass schedule. Like I think my wife and I'll go at 7:15, drop the kids off. We have to get back home. She has class, that kind of thing. Okay. 6 classes of Aquinas in a row. This is one of the main books that we're going to use for Aquinas. It is this like an awesome kind of aquamarine gray color, Aquinas on Law, Morality, and Politics, 2nd edition. Richard J. Regan is the translator. But that's not, I'm putting that to the side today. We're not going to do that. I'm going to be reading to you in some ways today from G.K. Chesterton's famous biography of St. Thomas Aquinas called St. Thomas Aquinas, quote, the Dumb Ox. It has the famous quote from Albert the Great on the back. You call him a dumb ox. I tell you, the dumb ox will bellow so loud, his bellowing will fill the whole world. People like Jacques Maritain, Etienne Gilson, Anton Pedges, who writes the forward, have called this one of the best works on Aquinas. In fact, G.K. Chesterton is making his presence felt in our class early because we cover him for 3 classes. Not the 6 Aquinas gets, but 3. And looking ahead, I'm definitely going to cover his 2 main works as I see them, Orthodoxy and Everlasting Man. But if you want 2 very good biographies on saints, good morning, Father Ben. I recommend Chesterton's St. Thomas Aquinas and his St. Francis Assisi. They're both very, very readable, kind of layman, accessible, which that's what I am. I'm a historian, I'm not a philosopher. So it's very good for someone like me. Just kind of the basic facts, the basic sketch. Now, today is day 1 of Aquinas. We're going to start off slow. We have 6 classes. Being President's Day, I've already kind of planned it to be a shorter class. Thinking 9:15, 9:20. We are going to step into the waters very slow. And although it's Aquinas class number 1 of 6, it'll be the class we talk least about Aquinas. We're going to set the kind of stage around him. Okay. Now, this Aquinas time period, first thing to note, if anyone's taking notes, is going to go from about, historically speaking, when I speak to you, from about the year 800. Again, that's a very important date in Catholic history. Christmas Day, 800 AD, Charlemagne is crowned Holy Roman Emperor. This is what, 324 years after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. 3 centuries after Benedict of Nursia, Ora et Labora, and Dark Ages, as they're so called, or the beginning of Catholic Christendom, which will last kind of uninterrupted in the West for 700 years until Martin Luther, all those guys, the quote unquote reformers or rebels, you call them what you want, of the 16th century. I want to start though with Aquinas' most famous thing though. I start with his most famous thing. Then I'm going to set the stage. We're actually going to talk about St. Francis a little bit. We're going to talk about Hildegard of Bingen today. And then for the next 5 classes, nothing but Aquinas. In fact, we're going to get so deep into Aquinas, it's going to be like, we're not going to see the forest from the trees. There's going to be a point where we're going through that book and other books, just Aquinas. Today is Aquinas and Friends. You may call today's lecture. What is Aquinas' most famous thing, arguably, in popular culture? Augustine, our hearts are restless till they rest in you. What is Aquinas most famous for in terms of an output, however this takes, of the 3,500 pages of his Summa? This occupies but a page and a half. I'm not the best at math. 1 out of 100 is 1%. 1 out of 1,000 is 0.1, 10th of a percent. So it's like 0.03. It's unbelievably small, but it's so famous. What? Let's see. But exactly, I'm looking for for Catholics, for serious theologians, someone interested in like Eucharistic theology, certainly devout Catholics. I mean, just even in popular culture too.
Is it his proof of God?
Exactly, his 5 ways. His 5 ways. The cool story about the Tantum Ergo. 2 guys apparently were commissioned to write this Eucharistic hymn, and the legend has it that one guy thought his was really good, and Aquinas, writes one as well. Aquinas reads or sings his first, performed first. It's exclaimed, Other guy just crumples his up, just throws it in the garbage. I'm not even, it's not worth it. It's so beautiful. His 5 ways. Okay, ready for his 5 ways? We're gonna cover these again. Let's just start right off the bat with like boom. Aquinas has 5 proofs for the existence of God. And guys, I'm gonna give you this, and I'm gonna tell you why I believe Aquinas is Logic Man 101. Number 1, the argument of the unmoved mover. All of these, again, are logical. You can be 100% atheist guy, desert island atheist guy, no understanding of transubstantiation and Catholic theology and the Holy Trinity. But you can just understand, oh, right. The argument of the unmoved mover is number 1. Okay, and we'll talk about his philosophy of ends, his philosophy of being, connecting back to Exodus 3:14 in a second. But of course, it has so much to do with this and God's non-contingent nature, whereas everything else is contingent. Number 1, the argument of the unmoved mover. God is the first cause. God is the origin point, the wellspring, the source for all motion. He is the unmoved mover. Against Eastern theology, etc., and what Aristotle called the infinite regress, Aquinas said you cannot have this. You cannot have endless, boxcars going back. You have to have an engine. You have to have a first source. My parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, it can't be infinite grandparents. Even if I produce a genealogy, a lineage of billions of people, there has to, but who created that person? God is the unmoved mover, the non-created being in which everything else subsists. Number 1, unmoved mover. Number 2, very similar, the argument of the first cause. God is the first causing agent. In fact, not just the first, the only. We hear, I'm not going to say atheist friends. Well, you said you gave your friend who's an atheist, go atheist. So we have atheist friends. Sometimes they're atheist enemies, which we should pray for them all the more. Our Lord says, pray for those who persecute you. So pray for all people. Atheist friends or not, we hear atheists talk about God is like this guy with a beard in the sky and whatever. And, blessed be God forever. It gets pretty blasphemous, even unintentionally on their end soon. No. Bertrand Russell's teapot, God, this kind of floating source, whatever. God is wholly outside of creation, right? God is not simply this bearded guy far across the galaxies that if we just have enough science, we can go and, find him with a telescope or something. And Yuri Gagarin, the first Soviet guy in space, went up there and said, I didn't see God, so God doesn't exist. So stupid, so infantile. But that appeals to a lot of people, right? God is the sky father. So if I go up high enough, I can see him. If there's no sky father, there's no God. And it's exactly like Aquinas famously says, an error in the beginning is an error indeed. It's exactly an ontological first cause. If you start that way, you're going to end up just missing everything, missing the boat completely, as do modern atheists, as they are wont to do. God is not number 1. It is not like God is number 1. Number 2 is like the Pope. He's like almost like God. God is off the scale. And in fact, Aquinas says in his theology, we learn about everything about God only through analogy. We can never comprehend God. Thank God for that piercing moment when God enters the world called the incarnation. And Christ himself, Lord, show us the Father. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Without that bridge of Jesus Christ, God is wholly incomprehensible, inscrutable to us. He's not just number 1 somewhere out in the sky, right? In fact, as the old awesome Baltimore Catechism question answers tell us, God is everywhere. Yes, God is in heaven. He's pure spirit. He's everywhere. He's in every tabernacle, in every church. He's here right now. Like he is omnipotent, omniscient. So his first 2, again, he is the unmoved mover. He's the first cause. He's that first causing agent. Now, number 3, argumentum ex contingentia, the argument from contingency. Contingency means the possibility of change. It means a paper trail, right? My existence was and is contingent upon my parents. Only my parents getting together produced the genetic code, everything that is me, right? That enabled my biological reality, my body to be ensouled. And that is what a human being, of course, is, right? An ensouled body, or, what would the opposite be? In flesh, spirit, whatever. You get my point. Like the amalgamation of our spiritual soul reality with our physical corporeal substance. That's contingent upon something. I didn't create myself. And so Aquinas says the universe did not have to exist, but it does. There has to be a cause. You can't have an infinite regress. So much of it's five crucials. You can't go all the way back to nothing. People are very angry. I don't know if you know this, in the 1890s, 1900, when their idea of, oh, maybe Aristotle is right and the universe is eternal, gets blown up. Gets blown up by what in the early 1900s? What scientific principle that all scientists seem to think is pretty legit now confirms creation in a sense?
Big Bang Theory.
Exactly, the Big Bang Theory. People, I can't tell you how many atheists were angry at the Big Bang. We think of the Big Bang, oh, it's just a science thing. They're like, no, get out of here. This is wrong, because that pretty much confirms what Genesis says. God said, let there be light. There's a creative spark. And now they say, right, these cosmologists say the universe is collapsing into itself. It has a beginning and an end. It's not eternal. Go ahead.
Well, the reason why the Big Bang is important for Aquinas's philosophy is because if basically one of the premises his arguments fall upon involve everything behaving the same way, more or less, in terms of cause. So everything has a cause. If we look at things, we can induce that they have causes. The tree of causality it's a tree, it's not a bunch of parallel lines. And that seems to be the case with every single thing we look at. So atheists in that era really wanted there to be eternality, because if there was something that looked like it was eternal and didn't change, then that would show that you didn't need God.
Exactly. However, though, even against that,
Aquinas is smarter than they are.
Right.
He would say, no. God's eternality is still something categorically different than something existing perpetually.
right.
There could be something that perpetually existed in time, and it's still not God's eternality.
Exactly. And it would still demand a creator, Aquinas says. Even if, because Aristotle said, okay, this is exactly, thank you. And this is excellent, and this is super important. Averroes, the Muslims, got Aquinas first. But they sadly fall into what Seeger of Brabant, one of Aquinas' contemporaries, is kind of like modern relativism, two minds. It can be true and false. You're Trish Schmidt, you're also not Trish Schmidt, whatever. The Muslims say, well, Aristotle said the universe is eternal, but the Quran, like the Bible, says it was created. Well, I guess it's both. We can have like religious truth. As a Muslim, I can believe what the Quran says. And as a scientist, Averroes, this philosopher, I can believe what Aristotle says. So Aquinas says no. Aquinas is big. I mean, everything about him is incredible. So we're spending 6 classes on him. But Aquinas says, please note this, there cannot be contradiction between faith and science. Aquinas is 100% against that. See, there's only one truth. If there is a God, and we know there's a God, we believe there's a God, everything is his domain. You can't say, I believe this is a Christian, but this is a scientist. We've heard that, right? That is a heresy. Anytime you hear anyone say that in society, well, I personally believe, in this, but as a scientist, I follow the facts. You're just admitting you're a moron, even unintentionally. Like the facts, the way the universe works, Aquinas says, is a common sense, plumber, blue collar logic of 2 + 2 = 4. And who designed that? God did. And Aquinas says, no, Aristotle, unlike Averroes, again, Aquinas gets Aristotle second. The Muslims have him first. Some people say, in a certain sense, Aquinas rescues Aristotelianism from Averroism. Aquinas says, even if Aristotle was right and he's wrong, and Aristotle called him the philosopher, he loves this guy. He has the highest respect for Aristotle. But he said, even if Aristotle was right and the universe was eternal, which is not, it's not eternal, it's created, Aquinas is saying, that still would not be the same thing as having a creator. It would still demand a creator. Even if it's eternal, where did it come from? Even if it's always been there, how did that matter, that stuff? Remember, he's very much like Aristotle, getting your fingers in the dirt. Well, where did that come from? It still demand a creator to create that. It is not self-creating. It can't be turtles all the way down, even with time taken off the table.
And that's also what Boethius says too. You probably mentioned this quote about is like eternality is
The absence of time.
the simultaneous possession of the fullness of life, I think, is something like that.
Mhm.
And that's still not something that an eternal universe, eternal matter would have. So
Right. And again, this sounds like hair splitting. This is awesome. This is gonna be so fun. And I'm gonna get to that in a second. Aquinas he's a plumber. Aquinas is the most blue collar guy of all time. I can't express that enough. Like We'll read to you what Chesterton says about him. But again, we're starting very slow. Look in these 5 proofs, how much we've already, this is already like, wow, you know. Anyways, okay. Argument number 4, argument from degree, degrees of perfection. We notice things are, some people have better voices, better whatever. You can make this as kind of juvenile as you want. God is ultimate perfection. All these perfections that we see in nature have to have an ultimate, it's almost like a Platonic argument of like the perfect form, right? And finally, the teleological argument, there is design, there must be a designer. Okay, so for instance, a guy got in trouble recently, an atheist scientist, and he said, the chance of there being blind, pure Darwinistic creation, evolution, excuse me, that what we call creation is responsive of like the strong will survive, survival of the fittest, genetic selection, all this stuff the Darwinists say, with no God, would be like the mathematical probability of a trailer park and a tornado goes through, just bust stuff up, and after the tornado leaves, there's a 747 jet perfectly assembled. Like that's the odds. Or for instance, like that you have 100 people and they just do this on the computer or whatever, and then take these manuscripts and throw them on the ground, a windstorm comes and like Shakespeare emerges out of that. Like it could maybe, there might be, maybe can't say it's 0, it's pretty close to 0, 0, 0, 0. And that's the argument from design. What is more common sense? That, you know, there is no God and things just, okay, I guess the universe just like made itself, even though it had to exist before it existed. That doesn't make sense, but don't worry about that. It's kind of absolute nonsense. Like Daniel Dennett, one of the 4 horsemen of the new atheist apocalypse, whatever, him and Christopher Hitchens and Dawkins, or Richard Dawkins are more famous, and Sam Harris, a neurologist. But Daniel Dennett is the only philosopher. And he makes this point, like the universe, you know, did this bootstrap trick or something where it created itself. It's like, no, that's epic fail immediately. It created itself. That means it would have to exist before it existed. That doesn't make any sense at all. It's terrible philosophy. It's horrible philosophy. I get that you don't like God. Blessed be God forever. I'll pray for you to find the grace of God with no cockiness and arrogance. Aquinas, number 1 lesson, smartest guy of all time, I think. Absolute smartest. Never ever treated people with contempt or anger. In fact, Ryan and I were talking about that. He would help people make their arguments better. That's a terrible atheistic argument. The problem of evil is a better one. Of like, if there's a God, why is there so much suffering in the world? That's a better argument. The argument the universe created itself sucks. That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So this thing wasn't there, but just kind of like, why you weren't looking really fast was there, and then it wasn't, made itself very small. It doesn't matter how small it is. Like Dennett talks about, like it came out of something very, very small. And it's like, no. Or they'll talk about, Richard Dawkins talks about in his blasphemous book, The God Delusion, that, oh, well, how did eye come about? Well, just a bunch of like cells that evolved, and eventually some seeing cells formed the eye. It either is an eye or it's not. It can't create itself. Again, if there's seeing cells, light something can see things, then it's already an eye. But how did it come by that? Oh, just by itself. Oh, I don't know. No.
Don't be fooled that these guys are in dialogue with Aquinas. They're not. They haven't even read Aquinas. They read like secondhand accounts, third-hand accounts of Aquinas. They don't even know like what Aquinas says.
They think Aquinas is a mixed drink that you drink on the Amalfi Coast.
No, like they don't know at all. It's like I've seen papers that tear apart Daniel Dennett's like book, like what is it? How nothing became something.
What a great title.
There's a reason why even the sophists and the Greek philosophers were like, yeah, it's either there's a creator or it's eternal. Like it has to be one or the other. You can't have spontaneity, or either the matter is eternal or God is eternal. One or the other. You can't get outside of that.
Well, see, that's what we're gaining towards. See how fun this class. I'm serious. Like I know, like I love this class. And I said again, the person to thank truly is Father Chase, because without his inspiration, I think I probably would have done a class in the 1990s. I still want to do something like that. Just the like depth 1990s, like where did we, like especially in light of the Ukrainian war, where did we go from America being? Because we did a class last fall on a Catholic America. I want to do a class in like America when it reached its zenith, which was the 90s, after the fall of Soviet Union, like what happened. And why that's also a myth. The 90s were so bad in so many ways, but horrible stuff. I mean, just the Rwanda genocide is one example. Anyways, I probably would have done a class like that, which I'm not even kidding. Like, I'm going to be Thomas Aquinas. Like, he's my hero. Thomas Aquinas said there's no stupid topics. Oh, the 90s, that's dumb. Aquinas, the reason he's so genius is he was so humble. He's like, you can learn anything from studying anything. Aquinas would have taken a commission, a grant to study like porta potties. Aquinas, by studying toilets, would have learned something. Like that's why he's the smartest guy of all time, I think. Like he didn't, as Christ himself, for example, Christ, as Christ wasn't, deigned to humble himself, divinity, to become a baby. Aquinas is like, I'll get on the floor and study the ants, whatever, like, because it all leads to that one cohesive eternal truth. So before I talk about the five points, again, in recap really quickly. Aquinas, my take, 5 seconds, and then we'll Chesterton, whatever. Aquinas, number one, his whole thing is the philosophy of ends, which is like almost untranslatable, but it's being. Remember Exodus 3:14, God's proper name is I am who I am. It's this idea of God is the being that must exist, without which the sine qua non for all of existence. So Aquinas is a philosophy of being. Unlike someone, if you know philosophy like Hegel, the philosophy of becoming. Everything is becoming, is transitory, evolutionary, blah, under Einstein's theory of relativity. We'll talk all about that later in the class. But Aquinas says, no, being. And in fact, the ultimate anti-Aquinas thing, unintentionally, is René Descartes' cogito ergo sum. Remember, Descartes in 1639, we'll talk about him after spring break. He says this, by the way, this thing becomes this anti-Christian snowball unintentionally. He does a pilgrimage to Our Lady of, I don't know what Our Lady of who, like was Our Lady of Loretto, but again, it's just titles for the one and same Blessed Mother, Queen of Heaven and Earth, Mother of Jesus Christ. Descartes does a pilgrimage, thanking God and thanking the Blessed Mother for her help in this. He's not trying to be, but like often, things snowball. His cogito ergo sum creates modern relativism, creates the matrix. I think, therefore I am, Descartes says. I think reality might just only be in my head. Maybe all of you are figments of my imagination. Barb, why can't I just like flip you off whenever I want? Because you're just like a character in my head. That kind of nonsense. Like it's like the solid.
I don't think that's the problem with Descartes, why he's like the first, like
Why not?
his error. I don't think his cogito ergo sum is the problem, it's what led him to the cogito ergo sum.
Okay, go ahead.
So like saying I think therefore I am is cogent. It's like saying there is an I, therefore I must exist. It's tautological, but tautological statements go unnoticed by many people. So, but the thing that what Descartes did is he's like, okay, I can't trust any of my senses, and I doubt and I doubt and I doubt and I doubt, because and then what am I left with? Stripped down from everything.
Right.
Assuming an evil god, an evil demon is deceiving me, what do I have left? My thinking. That's it. And so he was trying. He grounded that in objectivity, and I think that his proof for that is right, but it led to like this doubt of the world around him, which other people would develop fully. He didn't.
Okay, so stop. That's exactly what I'm saying, though. I think you and I are actually in agreement. Like, I agree with you. I mean, that is a true statement. Like the literal process of my cognition and my thought confirms my existence. I agree. And I don't think he was not a radical skeptic. What I'm saying is exactly, and I'm not saying he's to blame for this. Like if someone reads Ryan Alexander's book and then decides to go do some evil stuff because his character did whatever, is he responsible? No, he wrote a novel. I mean, stop. I'm not saying he's responsible. I'm saying that the way the philosophers will talk about later on, who get very, very much into this like doubting reality, often look at Descartes as a hinge of like, well, Descartes was the first guy to talk about the Descartes basically says this, the starting point, the ontological departure, like the horse leaving the starting gate in the Kentucky Derby is myself, is my mind. Aquinas is the opposite. Aquinas didn't say this, but he would say, I am, therefore I think. Like the fundamental reality isn't my head, it's reality. It's that Exodus 3:14, I am who I am, God made me. And the number one reality is I am. And once I know that I am, I'm in this world of natural law. And then I love, I fight, I think, whatever. The first thing isn't I think, it's not me. It's not about me. It's a very kind of subtle thing, but so I agree with you. Like people later on bend it and to their own purposes and whatever, and like really run with it and very kind of like, even down to literally like The Matrix, that movie with Keanu Reeves, which is, 360 years after Descartes, but has very much the idea of like blue and red pill and mental games. And like, whenever people talk today about, at least I take it this way, whenever like Elon Musk talks about like, are we living in a simulation? Kind of disgusting. It could be anything more anti-Aquinas than that. Maybe just we're all characters in Elon Musk's imagination. That's very much Cartesian, but unintentionally so. It's kind of like, well, why not? Why? How can I prove that his reality isn't the only one? It's very stupid. Chesterton condemns this in here, says, when one philosopher in the 19th century starts saying, I don't I don't understand why more people don't think that the only thing is that their own reality. He's like, that's a false statement itself. If I really believe no one else exists, I might even do philosophy, because why would I with my characters in my mind? It fools system right away. Aquinas' whole philosophy is the philosophy of ends, of being, of I am, therefore I think, because God is. And it's exactly as Ryan said, if Descartes later doubts the senses, Aquinas believed there's like 5 windows to the soul, and what they're the 5 senses. Aquinas, like Aristotle, is very much fingers in the dirt. Aquinas basically, as Chesterton says, believed an egg was, he believes an egg is an egg, period. It's not like, well, but it's not like, no, it's like, well, it depends, like, what do you mean by the egg? I mean, got to consider the different breeds of chickens, or is it scrambled or hard? Like an egg, what you think is an egg is an egg. This is a thumb. Like things are what they are. Like he in fact, Chesterton again says Aquinas might be the only rationalist who has ever lived. Aquinas was 100% like on the ground grounded, because he believed, taking Aristotle way further than even Aristotle did, who believed we can trust our senses, we should study stuff. He's like the message of God, Exodus 3:14 being who he is, and the message of the incarnation, that matter is good and holy, and what God made is holy, means that things are as they seem. And if we fall into certain mental illnesses or lack of perception or whatever, they're always defects, right? Sin, evil are defects in good. The ultimate healthy way to approach life is like a blue-collar plumber. See that toilet? What is it? It's a toilet. That's Aquinas, period. It's not, well, it depends if you reverse it. Like Aquinas is 100% about pure rationality. And it's crazy because he has just intimidating reputation as this like very high philosopher. He certainly was. He is absolutely the philosopher, the patron saint, you can say, of common sense, period. That things are common sense. So once more, his 5 proofs, just in order really quickly: 1, the unmoved mover; 2, the argument of the first cause; 3, the argument from contingency; 4, argument from degree; 5, teleology. There's a design must be designer. We'll revert or go back to those again. But let me give you now, I said this first class on Aquinas, we've talked a lot about him. It's not going to be all about Aquinas. It'll be the most non-Aquinas, the 6 Aquinas classes. Here's some facts. Charlemagne is Holy Roman Emperor from 742 to 814. Okay? He is the guy who begins Christendom, the senior monarch in Christendom, uniting the Frankish German tribes. The House of Habsburg, I don't think comes around to the 11th century, but it's like that kind of Central European, France plus Germany in a certain sense. Holy Roman Empire, that project that had been going on for a long time. I talked about this if you were at my last Spirit in Life with St. Boniface and the Germans, St. Augustine of Canterbury, conversion of Clovis and the Frankish barbarians to Catholicism. Finally, that combining of the embers, the ashes of what used to be pagan secular Rome, but since Constantine plus Theodosius had taken on the faith with these barbarian tribes. Charlemagne, Holy Roman Empire, 800 AD. The Treaty of Verdun, 843, is the first of the treaties that divides the Carthaginian Empire in the 9th century amongst his sons. Okay, so you already see with the Treaty of Verdun in 840, again, these are like, if you're not writing this down, we're good. I mean, this is not like, this is, if you want, I'm going to give you the medieval history at this time for the context. It's not necessary to know perfectly. I much prefer the 5 proofs and stuff Ryan Alexander was talking about, Descartes and doubting the senses and the kind of the logical stuff. This is just the background stuff. But it's his 3 sons, surviving sons. The Treaty of Verdun, 843, after Charlemagne dies, is going to create, in a sense, modern Europe and create even the kind of the Franco-German rivalry that will lead to 1871 and the Franco-Prussian War and World War I and all that kind of stuff. Europe is being created at this point out of what used to be called kind of Gaul and the barbarian lands post-Rome. How about some people we haven't talked about at all? 862, the Vikings are both running rampant, raiding coastal towns, and also establishing a foothold in Russia, actually. And in 882, Kievan Rus is founded. If anyone wants to know how old the roots are of the current Russo-Ukrainian war in the 9th century, Kievan Rus. Why does Putin think that Kiev, or Kiev, right, the new spelling K-Y-I-V as the Ukrainians prefer, why is that part of Russia? Just going back to this Viking era, 9th century. 10th century, Eric the Red, who's exiled from Iceland, begins the Scandinavian colonization of Iceland in the year 1001, palindrome, same front and back, 1001. Leif Erikson reaches Canada at L'Anse aux Meadows. That's 491 years before Christopher Columbus. A European guy is in North America. Leif Erikson, these Viking guys. Okay, Poles, 966, Mieszko the first accepts Christianity, ushers in the very famous Polish Catholic state. That's why when John Paul II talks about when he goes back to Poland in 1979 after he's elected Pope, he'll talk about 1,000 years of Polish Christianity and Catholicism against the Soviet plan to kind of atheize Poland, and that goes back to 966. 1054. What happens? Really important date. What happens in 1054? Great Schism, East and West. Exactly. You can talk about a proto-Protestant kind of thing. I mean, really, the proto-Protestantism. You talk about the Orthodox Second Council of Nicaea, the condemnation of iconoclasm, the statue smashing that the Orthodox were doing. Hence, why they have icons, two-dimensional icons versus statues in the West. You already see, but
in cans. See it yesterday. So it's interesting. One of them basically condemns sola scriptura.
as well. Wow. So that's amazing.
This is like, let anyone who doubts the traditions of the church or say that they're in error, things like that, now.
Wow. So 800 years. Yeah. I mean, that's perfect. Thank you for that. That's an excellent point. 800 years for the 95 theses on the cathedral door at Wittenberg, you have these questions of sola scriptura, sola fide, etc. That's excellent. It's so Catholic. It's a great way to spend a Sunday, reading old councils and stuff. And
didn't spend the whole day again.
But I mean, I think often, I will admit, I get very restless on Sunday sometimes. I like to work. And that's not some kind of fake pat on the back. I just like being active. Like, I don't work out on Sundays. I love to work out. I love to this conversation has gone way off on the rabbit hole. Like, I love to lift weights. I don't like on Sunday that I want to take that day off and rest. I don't like to rest. So often what mitigates that is, right, well, I'll read old councils or read stuff. Or yesterday I was doing a lot of reading Aquinas, and it was nice. I felt like my mind was well occupied. That the prohibition of keeping the Sabbath holy is to rest from servile labor, but you can do intellectual stuff. It's great, and that's very cool, whether you did it all day or not. One of the best Sundays I ever spent was reading Joseph Piper's The Theory of Leisure, What's the name of the book?
Leisure the Basis.
Leisure, the Basis of Culture. Thank you. I read that in a hot tub. That was awesome. 1054, Great Schism. 1066, the reason why the English language has 3,000 French words. William the Conqueror, Battle of Hastings, Normanization of England. 11th and 12th century, 1122, investiture controversy or crisis, who should appoint, local bishops? Is it the feudal lords? Is it what is the relationship between church and state? There's nothing new under the sun, C.S. Lewis would say. Not famously, because a million people have said it. The Romans said that. Nihil nos sub solum est, right? It's sold, it's forever. Resolved by the Concordat of Worms in 1122. First Crusade is called by Pope Urban II. He succeeded Pope Rural III. Laws, JK. Pope Urban, to get it, guys. Urban versus rural.
We got it.
You got it. Good.
We all do.
And then Pope Cosmopolitan the Ninth. Pope Urban II, 1095. The Crusades are going to go on for a long time. 1095 to 1291. There's 7 Crusades. 088. Oh, maybe it's 9. There's this real debate. It starts off pretty good for the Christians. The First Crusade, 1095, 1099. The Levant, recapturing the Holy Land. It starts going bad by the Third Crusade. Fourth Crusade is the ultimate chickens come home to roost of 1054. Because in the Fourth Crusade, 1202 to 1204, the streets in Constantinople were up to the knee in blood, with Christians killing Christians. And someone could say, wait, aren't you guys supposed to be fighting those guys? And those guys are you guys keep at it. It's awesome. You guys fight each other. So, and one of the most famous figures of the Crusades is King St. Louis IX, his famous Queen Mother Blanche. Louis IX, straight baller, really cool king. His advisors were angry because all he wanted to do is pray. I thought we were supposed to have a king. This guy's like a monk. And he's like, shut up, I'm going back to the chapel. And he's like a great warrior king. He goes and leads a bunch of crusades, even though he's very much like a lost cause figure, often unsuccessfully. But anyways, this time too, they're fighting the Albigensian Crusade, 1209 to 1229. Albigensians are Manichaean dualists who are suicide is okay, fornication is okay because the body is evil. They're 100% against matter, which is evil, which is satanic, which Aquinas, no, matter is good. Christ made matter good forever in the incarnation. All that God made is good. If the body is evil, that's not that is evil. That is not Catholicism. And anyone today who returns that sex is gross, ew, like you're being a heretic, actually, right? Of course, right? Praise God. Wait till you're married. Chastity is the holy virtue. Fornication is bad. Polygamy is bad. Hooking up with everyone is, I agree, bad. But if you're like, even in marriage, sex is disgusting. It's like you're a Cathar, you're a heretic. Get out of here. That's not church teaching whatsoever. I mean, I think John Paul II and Christopher West, who wrote the kind of like dumbed down version theology of the body for beginners, goes a long way in saying that no, sex is objectively good if it's in the way that God designed. A big thing that ends the Cathar heresy is what? Anyone know? Saint Dominic and the Rosary, the recitation of the Rosary. This is the founding time of universities. Bologna, 1089. Oxford, Father Chase, 1117. University of Paris, 1200. Paris is where our boy is going to be. Okay, that's pretty good, right? That's a good summary. That's great. And we're actually going to finish these 6 classes with Dante and his Divine Comedy. Dante's dates, please note, are 1265 to 1321. Dante dies in 1321, 200 years before Martin Luther, 196 years before 1517, the 95 Theses. And I'm very pumped, Father Ben, I'll confess to you, that I'm doing a Spirit in Life, right, on March 1st, about this stuff. This is actually awesome. This is almost never before have I ever had things so well dovetail. Where what we're talking about in the class, my Spirit in Life talk, remember last month was the patristics, right? We ended with 800. I'm going to be doing a Spirit Life talk from Charlemagne to 1500, focus on Aquinas. Like this is unbelievable. And I did not plan that. Because in fact, when Father Chase and I made the 24 themes back in August 2021, and there's some recent change where Father wanted me to cover the history while he was gone in Oxford, because I am a historian. And so when he would come back, the topics would be what, he was like, that's okay, I'll let you have that. And it was very smart by him. Like, all you have that, you can cover that yourself. I'm confident. If there's more like theological stuff where priests' input is needed anyways. So I didn't plan this. I'm just super pumped that what we're talking about in this class is a seedbed for what I'm going to be talking about to the whole parish, in 10 days. And for anyone who's like, oh, you sing during your hippo, it's going to be very, very serious, guys. Okay, it's going to be very, very, as Spirit and Life are, for all you people with zero sense of humor, complete boring people who are like staring at paint dry on a wall. That's my pleasure and pastime. No, but it's going to be it's going to be a talk that I would give at the Vatican. Okay, that's all I can put it. It's going to be no jokes. It's going to be just beautiful Aquinas stuff, pure, perfect gold, honey crisp, St. John Chrysostom, golden mouth, honeycomb notes of just perfect prose and theology. But it's not going to be boring. Thomas Aquinas is the opposite of boring. It's going to be very exciting. I'm actually very excited for this talk. We're going to finish probably in 15 minutes. I'd say it's, a little bit early today. I actually covered a lot. We're going to be covering a lot the next couple classes. But let me just give you some other people around this area proximate to Aquinas. We started with Aquinas. Hello, Betsy. We started with Aquinas, and we talked about his 5 ways. Before I really dive into him, which I want to do uninterrupted next 5 classes, what are some of his contemporaries? Hildegard of Bingen, 1098 to 1179, one of the coolest women in Catholic history for sure, maybe all of history. She was a German Benedictine abbess, female abbot, right, the head of an order. Very much a Renaissance man, a polymath, a writer, composer, philosopher, mystic, visionary. She's one of the early kind of scientists in European history. Hildegard, I don't know how to explain her other than she's kind of like part Mozart with her musical compositions. Part, well, I want to go to medical school. I'm going to at least play around in a very rudimentary way from what we call modern medicine today and like the 4 humors and stuff, but still Mozart in terms of composer, maybe / Gregory the Great, sacred music, plus a doctor, and very much the kind of mystic visionary Saint Teresa of Avila, you could say, like she's all those things in one. She also would be beloved by Moscow weird people for her love of herbal remedies and things like that. Medical and scientific, she'd very much have a booth at the farmer's market. She, in addition to all of her works, like I said, her different works and very polymathematic works on math, science, philosophy, she composed 69 musical compositions, one of the largest known repertoires among all medieval composers. She became well known for her healing powers, including the practical application of tinctures, herbs, and precious stones. So I mean, anyone can even say, oh, this is veering towards like new age weird stuff. I mean, she, from all intents, she's a saint, by the way. Benedict canonized her, Benedict 16th in 2012.
Well, I want to defend those people, even though they're very wrong. Because like the way that the medievals dealt with stone, they thought they contained natural powers and like they can do things and heal pain, stop bleeding, that kind of thing. I mean, they poo-poo, that's ridiculous, that's stupid, why would you ever think something like that? Well, what do we do for cancer patients? We blast them with radiation.
Sure.
Where do we get our radiation? By breaking down a bunch of stones.
Sure.
So it's like, yeah, they're not asserting something new agey, because the new agers think that, oh, there's like some secret power in the quartz crystal that if I arrange it in the right room, it's gonna do something. No. This is still like plumber's logic. They're just confused about the fact that there isn't actually a toilet there. Right, but they're so
Okay.
they're like,
Yeah, sure, fair enough. Yeah,
they don't.
100%. Exactly. And like Hildegard today would not be into like moon rocks with secret, powers to balance, feng shui and stuff. Exactly. That's exactly perfectly put. But what I'm saying is we don't have to, she was very much, again, a medicine woman already sounds so new agey, but she was very much into like a plethora of things. And in fact, I highly recommend go to YouTube and just type in Hildegard of Bingen music. It's awesome. Like go listen to it. They're hauntingly beautiful. It's like very, very simple constructions. It's I don't know. I'm not a musicologist. Where is Grace Martin when we need her? Everyone know Grace Martin? Grace Martin is she's a piano player, a very cool person. I think she's a grad student, or she's grad school, I think. She's grad school, okay. But Grace, if Grace was here, Grace is probably like related to Hildegard of Bingen. She seems like she would be like very much Hildegard-like. Devout Catholic, brilliant musician, all that kind of stuff. But in addition to that, she's also very much in these kind of herbal remedies and medicine, all that. Okay. She's what?
I want to ask them. I mean, this is kind of definitely rabbit trail, but I've never thought about this before. But as we talk about the saints, whichever saint you want to focus on, it's kind of a thought. If that saint were alive today, would that person have become a saint? It's environment and I mean,
Sure, of course it is. No, of course.
It's just kind of all our distractions, and maybe this woman would do the things play right and never.
Totally, yeah.
It's kind of, or that. Yeah.
Of course, no, of course. That is I'm all about great man history and like great man, great woman, people, Catherine the Great, like her, actions in 18th century Russia drive things, but of course things are environmental too. It's both. 100. Aquinas would say it's both. It's nature and nurture. It's definitely.
And Aquinas, you're building up to his when he finally came on the scene. That was still like 150, maybe 200 years before the printing press, I believe.
Almost 200.
And yet, the score is
exactly. Thank you for that. Let's get the dates correct. Thank you. Before I forget, you're right. So Hildegard again is 1098 to 1179. The next person immediately prior to Aquinas is St. Francis of Assisi. He's 1182 to 1226. St. Francis of Assisi, what can I say? He's not plumber's logic. He's plumber's emotion. Like he's St. Francis and Aquinas, Chesterton says they both were doing the same thing. They're bringing God back down to earth. They're reaffirming the holiness of matter in the incarnation against whether Aquinas often fighting the Augustinian old guard who are like almost still Neoplatonists and very much, and don't touch, Aristotle, he's this pagan, scary guy, to which of course Chesterton will famously say that Aquinas reconciles Aristotle to Christ. He's like, Chesterton describes Aquinas as kind of like Aristotle's RCI sponsor. Like he brings him into the church, like nothing to fear with this guy. He's not gonna, but anyways, and Francis of Assisi is bringing Christ back down to earth in the imitation of Christ. Chesterton famously says, we can say that Francis was a lot like Christ, and Christ a lot like Francis. Action, a man of action. Francis didn't sit around writing stuff. He's doing, he's going. Rebuild my church, the chapel of San Damiano. And he goes and does it. He's begging the blackest bread. Crusades. Francis goes to the Sultan in Egypt and tries to get martyred, which is actually sinful. Like I'm not anyone to criticize St. Francis of Assisi, please. This guy, I'm sure, has one of the highest places in heaven. What I'm saying is you're not supposed to seek martyrdom. Like the whole point of that golden mean of Christian orthodoxy. You're supposed to be ever ready to lay down your life for Christ. St. Thomas More is a great example. St. Thomas More did not try to get killed. He just told Henry VIII, John the Baptist style, you can't, to Herod, you can't have, your brother's wife, so to speak. You can't divorce Catherine and marry Anne Boleyn. And then he willingly goes to lay down his life. It was just Thomas More, who I'm actually, when I say I'm not a big fan of, I'm 100% fan. I'm saying I'm not into him. I haven't studied him a lot, but he's maybe the perfect example of Christian martyrdom. The guy was very much of the world, but always ready to lay down his life for Christ. Wasn't seeking, but St. Francis of Assisi wants to get killed. It's a positive flaw. He just loves Christ so much. Like, I want to be crucified. I want to just do everything. It's not good enough to strip down in the public square. I'm no longer, my father's son. I belong to God, and run out in the forest and lay down on the animals and preach to the birds. It's not enough to found this order, begging again, the scraps from the table, perfect, lady poverty. That's not enough. I want to actually get killed. And the Muslims, the Egyptian soldier, like, this guy's so boss, we can't kill him. This guy's like, he's so impressed by this guy. This is awesome. He's like, I wish I had guys like you that are so like, let's do it. Let me walk in fire and stuff. So he doesn't get his wish, but he gets the stigmata late in his life, right? Like, St. Francis of Assisi is not at all part of this class. He's not logical. And there's a good train where it's like, I think Protestants take it to a bad extreme, but there is an emotive part of religion. There is a point where, like, let your heart run wild, like, give yourself over to the path. Like St. Teresa of Avila apparently was, often in ecstasy, right? That's not logical, almost like drugged in God. And in fact, it was like, drugged, how dare you? What the Anima Christi, right? One of the lines against blood of Christ, inebriate me, right? Drug me, make me drunk in your love. That's St. Francis of Assisi. He dies in 1226. Let's finally get to St. Thomas Aquinas. We've done enough history and whatever. He dies in 12.
Natural causes, isn't
I think so. Yeah. I mean, he wasn't super old.
it?
12.
He was a martyr.
Yeah, exactly. He dies. He just dies. Yeah. I forget how he dies, but he's like, welcome, sister death. He's ready to die. And unbelievable. He's such an inspirational guy. He's been so, just like with Pope Francis now, he's got a new life, and people in the 19th century loved him. Victorian Anglicans loved him for an example, as kind of passionate example. If you believe the whole, like, well, the Victorians were so stunted and so prim and proper, and so they liked that. This guy was not like that. Aquinas is 1 year old when St. Francis dies. These are finally the dates of St. Thomas Aquinas' life. Ready? 1225 to 1274. Aquinas is a 13th century man. And so starting now at 9:20, and maybe we'll go to 9:30, I don't know, 10 minutes, a little bit. Starting now until March 20th, we're basically talking about nothing but St. Thomas Aquinas. Started with his 5 proofs. Now we're going to talk, we have so much to cover. I told you I was tempted to do this class entirely on St. Thomas Aquinas. And that would not have been a bad idea. I'm just glad, of course, we can see, first point to remember now before I forget again, Thomas is with Aristotle, as Augustine was with Plato. If you go with the classic thing of Aquinas and Augustine are the 2 greatest church fathers, let's say, church doctors, excuse me. So I'm glad that we had Plato and Aristotle before and discussions on them to see what this intellectual train is like. I'm glad we talked about Cicero. But I was tempted to just do the whole class on him. He's known as the angelic doctor, or the universal doctor. Aquinas is not his last name. He was from Aquino, right? Anyone know biography? He was highborn, lowborn. Anyone know? Like, he's elite guy, not poverty, itinerant, whatever.
I thought he was highborn.
Extremely highborn. His cousin was the Holy Roman Emperor. People talk about him being born on the edge of purple. He came from a very, very influential family. He's, I think, the youngest of 7 brothers, like the David story. What are his, especially his father, his mother kind of comes around him. What does his parents want him to do?
Become a lawyer, I think.
No.
No?
Or be a monk or religious.
What kind of monk? What order? That's correct. What order? They want him to become a Benedictine monk. A Benedictine.
Oh, Benedictine.
So Benedictine or at Labor, probably my favorite. I think I like the Benedictines actually the most. Thomas is like, no, I want to be Dominican. I want to be these mendicant, begging orders. They're like, that's absolutely scandalous. That literally to his family seemed like, we want you to become a lawyer. I want to go become an actor in Hollywood. Like, it was just like, no. His family, who's very well off, had him set up to become this path to become an abbot of a Benedictine monastery. They even proposed to at one point, you can wear the Dominican habit. And Aquinas, whose plumber's logic is like, I'm not going to do this half measure stuff. No, I want to become a Dominican. So he kind of escapes. He's on the road. His brothers kidnap him. And what do? They lock him in. Yeah, exactly. They sell him to the Egyptians, and he becomes granary president. Exactly. They lock him in a tower, and they're like, until he comes to his senses. They lock him in a tower. And again, it's hilarious. In such a devout Catholic age, they found it scandalous that he wanted to become a Dominican. He wasn't like going to become a rapper or like a mob boss.
Yeah.
He wanted to become a Dominican. But anyway, like exactly. But they lock him in a tower, and they finally send a prostitute to him. Like, this is going to do it. Libido dominandi. And the legend goes that the prostitute comes in, Aquinas, who never spoke, right? He's a dumb ox. And by the way, Aquinas, by all intents, was 100% terribly absent-minded. Anyone who's absent-minded, walking around a fog, you're in great company. Aquinas was always pondering something. They talked about, I'm going to give you two examples of Napoleon, but Napoleon Bonaparte is like, Napoleon went to the opera and they asked him what he liked about the show. And he's like, I was just thinking how I could get 3 armies, 3 divisions to Corsica in time. Like he was just thinking about the battles all the time. Aquinas was always contemplating philosophy. He'd be like, wait, what? Excuse me? And he was unfailingly nice and humble, truly a holy man in demeanor, but he just was like always head in the clouds. Any parents who were scolding their kids for not paying attention would have hated Aquinas. He would have been on like whatever Ritalin or whatever the thing is, like ADHD. Like he was always just kind of like zoning off. So he's like sitting in his tower and contemplating stuff. Prostitute walks in, he picks up a burning ember and like aims it at her. And he's a huge guy. He's an ox guy. And she apparently runs out terrified. Who wouldn't? And the legend goes that God at that point blessed him with complete lack of sexual desire for the rest of his life, which is a positive quality. Again, sex is good if you're a married person. That would be tragic if you're a husband or a wife in a marriage to have no libido, right? It's supposed to be, that's part of the natural way of things in marriage. I bet every priest would love that I never have be tempted sexually because I made a vow of celibacy. Let's just get over with. And so apparently for the rest of his life, like he was blessed with like he never had sexual temptation again after that moment, that he would be able to overcome that like that. And that he, in that moment, like slumped down into the chair of contemplation from which he would never rise again. Make a long story short, eventually he wins out. He becomes this Dominican friar. And he's very much, as our Lord says, right, when you go to a banquet, take the lowest place. Second example of Napoleon. Aquinas, again, I can't stress this enough. I think he's the most intelligent man who's ever lived. And you know who I have to back me up on that? Christ. Right? Christ says to him at the end of his life, you know, you've written well of me. He's like, talk about, remember what all the other reviews, New York Times, Kirkus books, like God himself says, good job.
That's the blurb.
That's the blurb. Yeah, it doesn't assume, but you've written, this is a good work, God. Yeah, and it's not a joke. It's real. And I'll talk about this in my spirit and life. I never realized, like, you know, Aquinas, what does he, you know, what will you have for my reward? What does he say? He says, nothing but you, Lord, right? And I kind of always thought in my own concupiscence, I'd probably be like, what I want for reward, I want to go to heaven in the end, and all my family too, and everyone. God, can I also have like 1,000-pound deadlift? Like I probably like, can I also like you probably ask for like whatever stuff, right? Really, he just wants God. And it shows the complete unity that he's already living in heaven now. Of the beatific vision is just to possess God, and it fulfills us. That's why he says to his friend Reginald, right? Everything I've written is like straw. Like all his genius doesn't, and that's actually the coolest thing. I often think about that. It'd be so cool to become like a 9-time Super Bowl champion like Tom Brady, and then to give it up. Anyone can give it up if they don't have it, but to actually achieve it and realize like straw is actually really cool. It's not a rejection. It's just like my friend who came, Father Chase Hilgenbrink. So you might have remembered him. He was here in the fall. He, you know, became a very good professional soccer player. Had played for the national team for a while as a youth. Played in Chile. Played in MLS, one of the top leagues in the world. Even the idea of like American soccer, you know, it's not the highest level as like La Liga and the English Premier League. The MLS is still a top 5 league in the world. He's like was absolutely the Father Chase Hilgenbrink was the precise definition of world-class elite athlete. And he gave it up. And he says in an interview, like, you know, people say you worked so hard for this. He's like, it was probably that moment. He didn't say this, like that it was like straw and Aquinas, but that's what he was basically saying. He's just like, I gave it up for a higher purpose, you know, and like I realized it can't fulfill me perfectly. So too with Aquinas. Anyway, with Napoleon, Aquinas is always seeking our Lord's injunction to take the lowest seat. Aquinas wants to be left alone just to do philosophy. And we're going to end this class on a hilarious story. So a hilarious story about him. So Aquinas goes to the Dominicans, and it would be like Napoleon wanting to remain a private soldier for his whole life. I don't want to be promoted. You're the best. Please, no, just let me do my philosophy. Send the prostitutes away, the drug dealers away, the everyone away, even the good, just send everyone away. Let me just sit here and philosophize. Father Reginald Foster, you want to know who that is? One of the greatest Latin. I'm actually going to finish the class with that video after I turn off the Zoom. Thank you for being here. See a cool video. He died recently, God rest his soul. He was one of the foremost Latinists in the world. And they asked him, like,
Is that what you showed a video?
I'm gonna show it to you again. Yeah, it'll be worth it. Yeah, I think probably him. And they asked him, how did you become so good at Latin? And he's like, you see this? You sit on your butt long enough. Like he actually was the son of a plumber. And he's very uncouth. And he's like, if you sit on your butt long enough, you'll become good at you. That's Aquinas. Aquinas wants to sit down and just do philosophy. Please leave me alone. So Aquinas, wealthy, has given up riches, given up this prestigious post as an abbot where he probably could be a scumbag. Remember, St. Francis trying to change that. He probably could have lived like a feudal lord. At that time, sadly, there's a lot of corruption in the church of like the local abbot, like this kind of princely guy and dying sumptuously every night. He wants to become this Dominican beggar. Okay, wow, fine. He's in class and he says nothing. And he just sits there like this. And people are like, this is the dumb ox. This guy's a freaking ox. He's freaking thick neck, fattest, biggest, fattest, thickest bull in the herd ox. And he's dumb as an ox. He's dumb as a wall. He's an idiot. All these kind of things, just sits there, right? Albert the Great, because he's a stud, and one of the greatest philosophers also, recognizes his talent, as is often the case. And he recognizes what I'm looking at with Aquinas is like enriched uranium, ready to make nuclear weapons, intellectually speaks. We're not talking about rocks and elements and stuff. He recognizes. So that's what he famously says, this ox, you call dumb, will bellow so loud. But that's not the funny story. The funny story is this. Aquinas was so humble that he allowed a guy, anyone know this story? If you do, shut up, because I want to tell it. This guy comes to Aquinas and he's like, hey, I see that you're basically the dumb ox. He doesn't say that, but I see that you're having a problem in class. Do you mind if I tutor you? And Aquinas is like, okay, like, and not in a funny way. Today people would be like funny, like, well, you tutor me? He's like, oh, of course, yeah. So Aquinas is sitting there and the guy's explaining stuff and tutoring him. And at one point, the guy makes a mistake. And Chesterton says it's that moment where Aquinas, finally his love of truth overcame his humility. And Aquinas very gently corrects him and explains it to an insane level. The guy falls on his knees actually and begs Aquinas to tutor him. And from that moment forward, it goes around the room that he's not a dumb ox, he's actually a nuclear reactor intellectually. But he sits in class like this, but he's actually like unbelievably, he was so holy and humble. He was so disinterested in love of God that he's like, I'm happy to be called dumb ox. I don't care. I'm not even mad about it. Call me a dumb ox, call me a smart ox, whatever. I am not seeking the approval that is from man, right? And it says in the Bible, that which is high in the eyes of men is an abomination before God. I just want God's approval. But so he allows himself to be tutored, even though he knows all this stuff. But the guy makes a mistake, and Aquinas says actually this, and then goes on to explain it perfectly. And the guy's like, "Oh, please, like, don't kill me." Basically, are you an alien? And at that point, it goes forward like this guy is. That's the first moment Aquinas steps out on the scene of like who he will become. On that note, God bless you, Betsy Johnson. Are you okay? Class in Ash Wednesday at 10 a.m. around that time, 10:15. Yeah.